Ryan's personality is like a serrated knife, and Justin comes in like a marshmallow. Blake obviously likes the serrated knife style. She is trying to be her own serrated knife. You can tell in all of the messages that she writes that she has decided to morph into her chaotic and disturbed husband. So she finds that to be where the power is. So for Justin to be who he is, she was immediately put off by him. And she'd already decided that he was just too lame for her to actually even have to take seriously. So before production had even started, she'd already decided that he wasn't worthy of her respect. And that's a major problem. And that kind of conversation is had between she and Taylor. So Taylor already knew whose side she was supposed to take. Blake Lively, Taylor Swift, Justin Baldoni, and Ryan Reynolds continue to dominate the news cycle as more and more texts are coming out. We don't have time to read every single word of all of these texts, and they're out there and they're available to you. And if you guys want me to do like longer videos in which I'm like reading you the full context and like all of the text messages, we can agree to do that. But more information has come out, which I find just illuminating about the characters involved. Of course, as you know, Taylor Swift has never impressed me. I've never bought her little persona. But the breakdown between her and Blake is really interesting to me because I find it interesting that somebody who writes music about being betrayed is the ultimate betrayer. In the text between Blake and Taylor, as we discussed on Wednesday, the two of them are scheming like never before against Justin Baldoni. They hated him. And it's been revealed in messages far before production started that Blake did not like Justin. She thought Justin was what she calls a feminist, F-A-U-X, minist. And she says that he's fake and that he's like this, he's like got a super annoying personality where he's like super therapized and everything. And I'm just going to tell you right now, I don't disagree with her. I do think he's annoying. And I think his annoyingness has really been buried in the fact that she's such a villain that to be annoying versus being evil, one of those is going to be highlighted. And I think that Blake and Ryan are evil people. So we are directing all our ire there correctly. But in the absence of Blake and Ryan, I think you and I can both agree that some of the things that Justin has done and said are a little bit obnoxious. For example, there are texts where he's talking with one of his other producers and the other producer's like, we cannot control this person. Blake is not to be controlled. She can't be controlled. And it's a long message that this producer is saying, listing all the people that Blake has just steamrolled over. No one can control Blake, and that's the ultimate point of the message. And then Justin responds with saying that he just got out of therapy, and one of the reasons this is really hard for him is that when he was a little boy, he wasn't good at standing up for himself, and his mom didn't let him play with his best friend anymore, and like he's still grieving that, and some of the grief of that's still coming out. It's like, please. You know what I mean? Like, I want to side with you so much, Justin. But you are a little bit obnoxious. And, you know, of course we do know that he had a podcast for the longest where he'd sit there with his man bun and like have these like existential conversations about like motivations and why we do what we do and just like, but all of it was like cloaked in therapized language. And it's just, he probably wouldn't be a person that I would find super stimulating to be around. Just, I can imagine he would be a little bit of a drain, you know? But the thing is, Blake had already decided that he was going to be a person that she did not like because Ryan's personality is like a serrated knife, and Justin comes in like a marshmallow. Blake obviously likes the serrated knife style. She is trying to be her own serrated knife. You can tell in all of the messages that she writes that she has decided to morph into her chaotic and disturbed husband. So she finds that to be where the power is. So for Justin to be who he is, she was immediately put off by him. And she'd already decided that he was just too lame for her to actually even have to take seriously. So before production had even started, she'd already decided that he wasn't worthy of her respect. And that's a major problem. And that kind of conversation is had between she and Taylor. So Taylor already knew whose side she was supposed to take, not Justin's. And so they're having this conversation back and forth. And a lot of people have said, well, you should see the kind of text that I send to my friends in support of their decisions in life. Like Taylor's not really that crazy for being aggressive against Justin. I mean, aren't we all when it's in defense of our friend? And to a point, I would agree. But at the same time, you also are in charge of making sure that your support is not blind support. You can be cheering on your friend, but when your friend decides to do things that are immoral, like wrecking a man's career, his life, based on shoddy claims, you are responsible then for egging the friend on towards negative behavior. So Taylor wanting to take her friend's side is not the sin, but when you see that your friend is sliding into Crazyville, don't allow friend to slide to Crazyville. So there's this interesting group of messages where Taylor is clearly easing out of Blake's life. Like she's just kind of over it. But rather than call Blake on, hey, you know what, this is hard for me, it's because I don't think you're functioning in reality. She just decides she's not going to message Blake that much. So then Blake messages Taylor and she's like, Taylor, where have you been? I know that I've been really heavy and difficult just because I'm so entrenched in this, and I know I keep talking about Justin and everything. I know that it's been hard, but I just don't really know where you've been, and I just want to check in because I'm just feeling scared about where are you going. And then Taylor responds interestingly, and she says that, you're not wrong. I haven't really been answering your messages. You're right. It has been kind of heavy on the Justin talk, but I'm fine with that. It's just that every time you write me, I feel like I'm receiving a corporate email. You never talk to me like we're just friends. You keep referring to yourself as we. And I feel like the tone of your letters is kind of like a mass message to everybody, and there's less of our relationship in it. All of the ways that these people talk to each other are weird to me. I mean, if you're Taylor and you understand where your friend is coming from, why do you need her to pause with what's going on? Because it would seem that it's completely encompassing Blake. Wouldn't it seem like you wouldn't need your friend to, at that moment, be the kind of friend you needed if you believed in what she was doing? I don't feel like I would need my friend. I mean, I don't know. I demand a lot more of my siblings probably than I do of my friends. So maybe if it was my sister and I felt like I was losing touch with my sister and that I was becoming part of the group of friends that were supporting her and I was really nothing more to her than just one more soldier in the army of support, I can imagine reacting that way. And again, I don't know how close Taylor and Blake really were ultimately. But I guess I just wouldn't feel like I needed to have personalized messages if I felt like my friend was fighting for her life and I believed that story. But I would probably question it if I didn't really believe my friend was quote unquote fighting for her life. At that point, I'd be like, you know what, I kind of think you're making a mountain out of a molehill. And I would like us to be friends again because I don't really know that it requires you to make this big of a stink about it. So I feel like what Taylor is saying without saying it is, are you going to come back to reality or what? But she doesn't say that. She's like, the corporate email sound of it all is a little bit hard for me to take. And, then Blake responds in typical Blake way where she starts out her response as though it is a corporate email. And then she's like, just kidding. But anyway, and then she goes on to tell a sob story and then try to throw Taylor a bone about I'm really glad that touring's almost over for you. And these constant sinus infections can finally clear up and you don't have to have such sore knees all the time. And, anyway, and then she ends it again as though it's some kind of corporate email. Your complaint has been lodged. Why are she and Ryan so doofusy in their emails? It's painful is what it is. Anyway, it's clear that Taylor was easing Blake out probably before everything actually fell to pieces publicly. There's a lot of people, myself included, wondering hey, Taylor, why did you just throw her to the wind as soon as you were afraid that your texts were going to come out? But it kind of seems like Taylor was over the conversation a while ago. And being a massive manipulator herself, she could probably sniff out some manipulation. And one manipulator is not going to sit there with another manipulator and drink the Kool-Aid. because you know what your friend is about. You know she's just crying and complaining and carrying on about Justin on and on and on because you've done the same thing to other people before. Cried and carried on and complained about a boyfriend when you both know full well that you were part of the reason why things broke up. So I just think one manipulator just could not deal with the other manipulator is what I think. But I don't know that it's so much like suddenly Taylor could not be found. I think Taylor was ghosting Blake a while ago. Also, I think that Taylor is really good at manipulating people, clearly. I think she is very astute at seeming charming and likable and keeping the evil under wraps, clearly. We know she did not ascend the ladder of fame and fortune without knowing how to play the game, but she's really good at not seeming to know how to play the game. And I think that Blake's clunky pleads to friends, her blatant unkindness towards Justin, her need for everybody to believe that he was the absolute worst person ever, in the form of just degrading talk, immature jabs. I think the overall clunkiness of it was offensive to Taylor's more refined manipulation techniques. I think that Taylor was probably embarrassed for Blake and annoyed that Blake was doing it so badly. And I think that's why she washed her hands of Blake. I think she lost respect for Blake's ability to play the game. Anyway, in all of these messages, we also have messages from Ryan where he just has zero respect for other people's time. And why I say that is the novels that he writes texts longer than your leg. I wish I was joking. These look like emails, but they're text messages. I lost the will to get through him because they're not interesting. It's him loving the sound of his own voice. He says crazy, stupid things like, hey, so-and-so, I saw you the other night. We were only 3 feet away from each other, but I couldn't get away to talk to you. I was literally being trapped in somebody else's mouth. Actually, I'm still there. I'm surprised I even have cell coverage. Anyway, it's like, who taught you to write like this? Who's talking in your head when you're writing your text messages? What demon is deciding to write for you? Because the way that he writes is so annoying. He really thinks he's clever, but it's very evident he thinks he's clever. His voice is very specific to him on the page, except for Blake, who's over there trying to do some kind of impression of him every time she writes. The two of them write very similarly, but he is super charmed by himself. In the same way that we talked about how Blake is when she writes, they're writing for themselves. They're not writing for you. It's very clear that they think that they're super smart and wordsmiths, really. And I think what was very offensive to my sensibilities is in one exchange, after this huge long diatribe of a text, this sycophant actually responds to him and says, "You are such a good writer. I love the way you write." Why are you telling him that? No, you don't. You hate it. Everyone does. What are you talking about? I love the way you write. No, you don't. This person just wasted 15 minutes of your life so that he could write out a text that probably took him 35 minutes to write. And he says crazy things like, there's an opening line to an email where he feels like Blake is not getting her due and she's not getting the support that she needs. And he writes and he's like, "I know that I seem angry, but trust me, there's a lot more rage in the tank." Who says things like that? You are a crazy psychopath. Anyway, let me know if you want me to do a deep dive into all of Ryan's messages. We just have other things to talk about today, so we don't have time to do a deep dive into his messages. But when I tell you the man is psychotic beyond anything I've ever seen, something is deeply wrong with him on a level I don't know if I've ever seen from anyone in Hollywood before. I think to be an actor, you have to be a little bit unhinged. But to be like this, to go to bat for your wife when you know she's a liar, to insist that everyone support her and that if you don't support her, there's something nefarious about you. That person is an insane person, because it's very clear that everything that Blake has ever said about the harassment, about the SA charges, about, the SH charges, all of these all come down to, I didn't like his vibe. His vibe was off to me. Well, you might not like the crying in the man bun, but that does not a sexual assaulter make him. Unbelievably annoying. The other thing is that everyone was annoying. Blake's annoying. Ryan's annoying. Taylor's annoying. Justin's annoying. But the lady who wrote the book, Colleen Hoover, she's super annoying. And I think Colleen's problem is this. Colleen Hoover seems to me like a person who always wanted to be on the in crowd. And when she finally had the opportunity to be in the in crowd, she didn't know how to stand up for herself, her work, or the ethics of the situation. Colleen had come out and said that Justin Baldoni was a horrible person to have to work for. His production company did not ever bring her in, and that she was left in the cold wondering what was going on. First of all, if you sell the rights to your book, then you effectively left yourself out in the cold. If you want to be all in, you have to make sure that that provision is there. But the thing that's crazy is her book was adapted into a script. I erroneously said Justin had done it. He didn't do it. It was a different person who did it. But she says that Wayfair, the production company, didn't let her see anything about the script, and that she didn't find out about it until like the fans found out about it. What are you even talking about, is what Wayfair said. And then went on to release a bunch of texts exposing Colleen Hoover and exposing the fact that she says, no one let me in. And they're like, well, what about all these text messages where we're letting you know the plot line, the storyline, where we're going with this. And you saying, I love that. I love those changes. That's really great. I never thought about it from that perspective. That's wonderful. That's amazing. That's great. And now she wants to say on the other side of things, they left me out. There I was, I only wrote y'all the story. I only gave you the idea, and then you didn't even have the dignity to let me in. Again, they aren't under any obligation to. But like, she was as involved in like one time a character had a certain tattoo in one position, and she's like, I don't really like that. Let's make sure that that's not there. So in the post-production of the movie, they've made sure to edit it so that the tattoo is not where Colleen didn't like it to be. Explain to me how that's you being left out in the cold when even a detail so small as the placement of a tattoo is changed at your whim. Please, Colleen. I know you were always, with your little crazy stories in the background, wishing one day you could be a writer, and then against all odds, your sad, sorry, pathetic books have made it repeatedly to the top of bestseller lists because we are not readers anymore, and we're willing to take your absolute pond scum as literature in this day and age. Okay, I get it. No one understands how you went from a self-published author on Amazon to suddenly being this bestseller. Okay, believe me, girl, you were in on something. Okay, no one believes that a self-published author with this kind of drivel managed to escalate in a natural, organic way. So you've been playing games of your own, because your books are trash. Shockingly trashy. The writing is some of the worst things I've ever seen. The characters, completely underdeveloped. Everything is a wreck in your books. But probably because you are a wreck. What kind of person comes out and says I was left on the outside when there's actual text messages to prove that you aren't? And then what kind of spineless weakling decides to unfriend the guy who made the movie of your pathetic book? What kind of a person's like, well, I just did it because Blake told me to? Why did Blake tell you to? Why are you under the impression, after working for the same guy, why are you under the impression that you need to hate Justin? You get to have your own experience with him. Just because the popular girl said we don't like that guy anymore doesn't actually mean you don't have to like him. You can actually stand up for yourself. This actually isn't ninth grade. Pathetic, Colleen.